I forget exactly what it was. But I think that there was a fireplace with it, and the fire.
For years, James Stewart had Hollywood at his feet. Fame, fortune, and a seemingly endless parade of beautiful women. With his signature charm and boy-next-door charisma, he became one of the biggest stars of cinema's golden age, captivating audiences in classics like It's a Wonderful Life, Rear Window, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Behind the scenes, Stewart's love life was just as exciting as his films. He dated some of the most glamorous women of the era, including Marlene Dietrich, Olivia de Havilland, Ginger Rogers, and Loretta Young. For decades, many believed the lifelong bachelor would never truly settle down. But then he met the woman who changed everything. So, who was the woman who finally captured the heart of Hollywood's most charming bachelor? Join us as we uncover the surprising love story behind James Stewart's greatest romance. From small-town boy to Hollywood's most unlikely leading man. Before James Stewart became one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, he was just James Maitland Stewart, a shy and awkward boy growing up far from the glamour of the film industry in Indiana. Born on May 20, 1908, to Elizabeth Ruth and Alexander Stewart, he was raised in a strict household where discipline, modesty, and hard work were central values. His father owned a hardware store and expected his eldest son to eventually take over the family business, a future that seemed inevitable in Stewart's early years. To prepare him for that path, Stewart attended Mercersburg Academy before enrolling at Princeton University to study architecture. On paper, he followed the life expected of him. In reality, something else had already begun to take shape. At school, Stewart discovered music and drama groups, taking on small stage roles that revealed an unusual naturalism beneath his reserved personality. He was not polished or conventionally charismatic, but audiences noticed him anyway. Everything shifted in the summer of 1932 when Stewart joined the University Players on Cape Cod. There, he worked alongside future stars like Henry Fonda and Joshua Logan. Among the troupe was Margaret Sullivan, who became one of the most emotionally important figures in Stewart's early life. He admired her deeply, beginning a pattern of romantic longing that would define much of his bachelor years. When the season ended, Stewart followed his fellow actors to New York City, sharing cramped apartments and uncertain prospects with Fonda and actor Myron McCormick. Fame felt impossibly distant. What followed were years of unstable stage work, failed productions, and repeated rejection. He appeared in plays like Carrie Nation, Spring in Autumn, and All Good Americans, earning occasional praise but little security. At one point, after another disappointing stage run, Stewart seriously considered abandoning acting altogether. His breakthrough finally came with Yellowjack, where critics praised his performance almost unanimously. The production itself struggled commercially, but Stewart had finally proven he could carry emotional weight on stage. That momentum eventually led to a 7-year contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1935. Even then, Hollywood did not immediately know what to do with him. Studio executives reportedly described him as a lanky young bumpkin with a hesitant manner of speech. He was loaned out to smaller productions and supporting roles while MGM searched for a way to market him. The turning point came with Next Time We Love, when Margaret Sullivan personally pushed for Stewart to be cast opposite her. During rehearsals, she helped him embrace the very qualities Hollywood executives saw as flaws. His awkwardness became charm. His hesitation became sincerity. Critics quickly noticed the difference. Stewart began standing out in films like Wife vs. Secretary, Small Town Girl, and Speed. Even when the movies themselves underperformed, reviewers consistently singled him out as authentic and emotionally believable. By 1938, everything finally aligned. Vivacious Lady showcased his talent for romantic comedy, while Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You transformed him into a genuine leading man. Capra recognized that Stewart's uncertainty on screen was not weakness, but relatability. Audiences trusted him. The rise that followed was rapid. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington earned Stewart his first Academy Award nomination and turned him into a national figure. The Philadelphia Story brought him an Oscar and cemented him as one of Hollywood's defining stars. Within only a few years, he had gone from struggling stage actor to one of the most respected men in American cinema. By the early 1940s, Stewart was starring in major films like Destry Rides Again and The Mortal Storm, while also becoming a recognizable radio personality. His slow, hesitant drawl became instantly famous and widely imitated. Then, at the height of his fame, Stewart made a decision that permanently separated him from many of his contemporaries. During World War II, he enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces. Unlike many celebrity enlistments, his service was not symbolic. Stewart pushed repeatedly for active combat duty, eventually flying bombing missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. By the end of the war, he had risen to the rank of colonel and returned home as a decorated war hero. The war changed him. When Stewart returned to Hollywood, his performances carried a heavier emotional depth. Films like It's a Wonderful Life reflected that shift, balancing warmth with exhaustion, fear, and vulnerability. In the 1950s, he entered another defining chapter of his career through collaborations with Alfred Hitchcock and director Anthony Mann. Movies like Rear Window, Vertigo, and Winchester 73 revealed a darker, more psychologically complicated version of Stewart on screen. The affable everyman was still there, but now layered with obsession, paranoia, bitterness, and moral ambiguity. Across the decade, Stewart reinvented himself repeatedly, moving effortlessly between thrillers, westerns, dramas, and romantic films. He became one of the few actors of his generation capable of balancing vulnerability and authority at the same time. Awards followed, along with critical acclaim and enormous box office success. Yet despite the fame, military honors, and lasting cinematic legacy, there remained another side of James Stewart's life that fascinated Hollywood almost as much as his career. His long reputation as one of the industry's most eligible bachelors and the glamorous women who passed through his life before he met the love of his life. Hollywood's most eligible bachelor. By the time James Stewart was in his 40s, he was well established in Hollywood, and his private life had become a subject of constant speculation by tabloid columnists. Those who knew Stewart best were almost certain that James would never settle down. He was charming and admired, effortlessly popular with women, yet reluctant to commit. To the public, he'd become more than just a leading man. He was the quintessential American bachelor. But even before the fame, James Stewart had always pursued women he was romantically interested in. Before his fame, James Stewart had always pursued women he was romantically interested in. During his years with the University Players, he became deeply attached to actress Margaret Sullivan. Stewart fell hard for her almost immediately. They spent long stretches together performing in summer stock productions, alongside friends like Henry Fonda, but Stewart's natural shyness often kept his feelings restrained and indirect. He admired Sullivan intensely, eventually asking her out, though the relationship never developed into romance in the way he hoped. For Sullivan, the connection was different. She cared deeply for Stewart, but more as a close friend and creative partner than a romantic match. Another member of their theatrical circle, Henry Fonda, also became involved with her, and she would eventually marry him instead. Even so, Sullivan remained one of the most important influences on Stewart's early life and career. Primarily a stage actress with a relatively brief film career, she later appeared alongside Stewart in films such as The Shop-Worn Angel, The Shop Around the Corner, and The Mortal Storm. As Stewart transitioned into film and his fame rose in the late 1930s, his romantic life became increasingly visible and complex. He was regularly linked to some of Hollywood's most prominent women, and unlike many stars who carefully curated public relationships, Stewart's connections often felt spontaneous, brief, and unforced. In 1935, he was briefly involved with Ginger Rogers, a relationship that formed through mutual friendships within their Hollywood circle, but did not last long. During the filming of The Shop-Worn Angel, he was romantically linked to actress Norma Shearer. Not long after, he became involved with Loretta Young, a relationship that ultimately ended when Young sought something more stable than Stewart was prepared to offer at that stage in his life. Even then, there was no scandal, only a familiar pattern of admiration that never fully settled into commitment. That pattern intensified during the late 1930s and early 1940s, when Stewart reached the height of his pre-war stardom. While filming Destry Rides Again, he entered into a brief but widely discussed affair with Marlene Dietrich, who was married at the time. The relationship ended after production wrapped, and Dietrich later distanced herself from that chapter of her life, treating it as a fleeting moment rather than anything lasting. Around the same period, Stewart also became romantically involved with Olivia de Havilland. Their relationship was one of the closest he had experienced up to that point, and at one stage, he even proposed marriage. However, de Havilland ultimately declined, later explaining that she did not believe he was ready to settle into marriage. Their relationship ended not long before Stewart's life took a dramatic turn with his military service. Even that chapter of his life did not slow his reputation as Hollywood's most consistent bachelor. During World War II, while serving in the United States Air Force, Stewart met singer Dinah Shore at the Hollywood Canteen. Their relationship developed quickly, and at one point in 1943, the two were reportedly close to marrying in Las Vegas before Stewart abruptly backed out, later attributed to hesitation and uncertainty about commitment. After the war, as he returned to Hollywood as a decorated officer, Stewart's romantic reputation continued to follow him. While filming The Stratton Story, he was linked to actress Myrna Dell, with gossip columns speculating about a possible engagement, claims Dell herself later denied, much to no one's surprise. James's bachelor status had become fixed at this point, until a chance encounter at a holiday party changed it all. From eternal bachelor to family man. For me, it was love at first sight, Jimmy Stewart once said about meeting his wife. According to later accounts from his daughter, Kelly Stewart Harcourt, Stewart first met the woman who would become his wife, Gloria Haytrick McLean, at a Christmas party hosted by Keenan Wynn in 1947. The meeting did not begin smoothly. Stewart had reportedly crashed the gathering and arrived in a less than stable condition, leaving an unimpressive first impression. Gloria, 10 years younger than Stewart, was already a divorced mother of 2 young sons and carried herself with an ease that stood apart from the Hollywood social circuit. Vogue once described her as refreshingly handsome, with large green eyes, clearly marked brows, and loosely combed bright brown hair, noting that she looked in casual clothes the way most people hoped they would. Stewart himself later admitted she struck him immediately, calling her a good sport and saying she had an incredible sense of humor and was really beautiful. Gloria, however, was not easily pulled into Hollywood attention. She was often invited to high society functions, but avoided most of them, preferring what she called the outdoors by day and quiet evenings at home. It was that temperament, unaffected and grounded, that first set her apart for Stewart. It was not until a year later, at a dinner party hosted by Gary Cooper and his wife, that they properly reconnected. This time, Stewart was seated beside her. Their conversation was brief but direct. She mentioned her 2 young sons, her love of golf, and her interest in conservation. Stewart later recalled, "I could tell right off that she was a thoroughbred." Gloria, for her part, remembered the moment differently, but with equal clarity. "At the time, I had a beautiful big German police dog named Bello," she said. "When Jimmy saw me to the door, Bello took one look at the strange man and went for his jugular." The encounter nearly ended before it began. Stewart returned the next afternoon for a golf date, but as he later joked, he had to woo the dog before he could properly see her. He brought the animal steaks, spoke to him gently, and slowly earned his trust. "It got to be pretty humiliating," he admitted, "but we finally got to be friends. I was free to court Gloria." What followed was a long, steady courtship that unfolded away from publicity or spectacle. After nearly a year of seeing each other regularly, they became engaged. When Stewart proposed, Gloria accepted. On August 9, 1949, they were married at Brentwood Presbyterian Church in Los Angeles. The ceremony was small, with only about 18 guests inside, while hundreds gathered outside hoping for a glimpse. Stewart, then 41, was already one of Hollywood's most recognizable actors, though he approached marriage with a deliberateness that contrasted sharply with the industry around him. His agent once remarked, "By that time, a lot of big Hollywood stars are working on their 3rd or 4th wife. But that's not for Jimmy. He's very old-fashioned about such an important step." Marriage also meant becoming a father. Stewart adopted Gloria's 2 sons, Ronald and Michael, and fully embraced family life from the start. In 1951, the couple welcomed twin daughters, Judy and Kelly. The delivery was difficult, and Gloria spent weeks in hospital recovering. A nurse later recalled Stewart's constant presence, saying she had never seen such an outpouring of love and concern, adding that when Gloria was finally discharged, he was so eager he nearly forgot to help her into the car. In the years that followed, the structure of his life shifted around family. The home they built together became a place of stability, separate from Hollywood's constant movement. Stewart's public image continued to grow through a steady stream of work, but at home, his focus was increasingly domestic, centered on routine, presence, and the small rituals of daily life that grounded him more than any public success. Those who knew him noted that he was most at ease in ordinary moments with his children, fully present in ways that surprised even close friends. Holidays, especially Christmas, became central to that rhythm. His daughter Kelly later recalled how he would dress as Santa Claus and commit completely to the role, even after the children began to suspect the truth. By the late 1950s and into the 1960s, Stewart's career had become more selective, but his identity at home remained constant. He continued working, yet it was family that defined the shape of his days. Even as his professional life evolved, the foundation he had built with Gloria and their children remained the center of everything. Yet even that foundation would eventually be tested in ways he could not have anticipated. Death of a son. In 1969, James Stewart and his wife, Gloria Haytrick McLean, received the devastating news that their eldest son, Ronald McLean, had been killed in action in the Vietnam War at the age of 24, while serving as a lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. It shattered the sense of stability Stewart had spent decades building around family life. Friends later observed that while Stewart rarely spoke publicly about grief, Ronald's death affected him in a way nothing else ever had. After graduating from college in the mid-1960s, Ronald had joined the Marines, a decision that filled his parents with pride. One photograph from the period captured Stewart smiling as he pinned lieutenant's bars onto his son's uniform. In June 1969, Ronald was assigned command of a reconnaissance unit in central Vietnam during one of the most brutal stretches of the war, only a year after the Tet Offensive, and amid a conflict that continued grinding forward despite growing unrest back home in America. Shortly after arriving in the field, Ronald's squad was transported into the jungles near the DMZ by helicopter and quickly found itself surrounded by a much larger North Vietnamese force. Requests for extraction were denied, leaving the small patrol trapped deep in hostile territory. For 2 days, the 6-man recon team fought at close range under relentless pressure. During the firefight, Ronald reportedly left cover to help one of his wounded men. He was struck in the chest by sniper fire and killed beside the jungle trail. When American reinforcements finally reached the patrol, Ronald was the only American soldier dead. The loss devastated the Stewart family. Publicly, Stewart carried the grief with the same restraint and dignity that had long defined him. In a rare reflection on the subject, he said, "I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think of Ron. He didn't want to be drafted. He wanted to be a Marine, and I encouraged it. I thought it was wonderful. He wanted to serve his country. I don't think it's a tragedy. It's a loss. I don't know. It's a terrible, terrible loss. But tragic, no. He died for his country." At that point, Stewart was overcome with emotion and couldn't immediately continue. Even so, he rarely framed the moment in public as anything other than duty fulfilled, speaking of his son with a restrained pride that sat alongside unmistakable grief. He never lashed out politically or spoke bitterly in interviews, but those close to him noticed a permanent change afterward. Something heavier settled into him after 1969, lingering beneath even his happiest moments and later successes. It marked the first time the carefully built world of family, routine, and private happiness had been violently disrupted. For Stewart, it became a grief that never fully left, even as life continued outwardly. He remained active in film and maintained his public image, but those who observed him closely described a change in him after 1969. There was a heaviness that did not lift, even in moments of success or celebration. The loss of Ronald became a shadow that loomed over James for the rest of their lives. And yet, the loss of a son wouldn't be the last major tragedy that Stewart endured. The death of Gloria. By the early 1990s, James Stewart and Gloria Hattrick McLean's marriage seemed stronger than ever. They'd beaten the odds, outliving most marriages in Hollywood, weathering time, fame, and the tragic loss of their son. For 45 years, they'd been the center of each other's lives. But all that changed in the fall of 1993 when Gloria was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was a development that stunned those close to the family, but it hadn't exactly been surprising. By that point, she was in her 70s and had lived for decades as a heavy smoker. At first, she refused treatment. Like many people who are suddenly confronted by their own mortality, she was hesitant to tackle the problem head-on. But she relented eventually, after strong encouragement from her husband. The treatment, however, proved extremely difficult. After sessions of chemotherapy, she became visibly weaker, lost her hair, and grew increasingly fatigued. What had begun as a hope for more time slowly turned into a painful realization of how limited that time might be. As her condition progressed, Gloria began asking for complete honesty from her doctors about what lay ahead. The answer was devastating but clear. The chemotherapy would likely offer only a minimal extension of life and would not change the outcome in any meaningful way. Faced with that reality, she made the difficult decision to stop treatment altogether. From that moment, the focus shifted away from trying to extend time and toward simply living through what remained of it with as much dignity and comfort as possible. Inside the Stewart home, the change was immediate. The couple had spent nearly 50 years together, and suddenly their shared life had narrowed into a fragile routine centered around care, presence, and anticipation of the inevitable. Friends and family later described those final months as deeply intimate but heavy, defined by long periods of silence, reflection, and closeness rather than activity. In the final days of her life, James Stewart remained by her side for hours at a time. Those who were close to the family recalled one particularly emotional evening when he spent more than 2 hours at her bedside speaking to her privately. According to accounts from family and friends, he reflected on their 45-year marriage and expressed how central she had been to every part of his life. It was described as a deeply personal, heartfelt moment, less like a public figure speaking and more like a husband speaking entirely to the person who had shaped his world. On February 16, 1994, Gloria passed away at the age of 75. Her death marked the end of a marriage that had anchored one of Hollywood's most enduring careers. In the words of one friend, she had always been Stewart's rudder, anchor, and helm, and without her, he was left, as they put it, lost at sea. It was a description that would come to define the emotional aftermath of her passing. Stewart withdrew from public life almost immediately, stepping away from the industry that had defined him for decades. Those close to him observed a profound retreat inward. He avoided appearances, declined invitations, and gradually disconnected from much of the social world he had once moved through with ease. In the months that followed, his life became increasingly private. He spent most of his time at home, often in his bedroom, only emerging when his children visited or the housekeepers urged him to. Even long-standing professional and personal connections found it difficult to reach him. Letters went unanswered, social visits stopped, and public engagement effectively ceased. It was as if the external world no longer held the same relevance it once had. With the foundations that had held his life together for decades gone, James Stewart would follow his wife a few short years later, as age, illness, and isolation began to take their final toll. Fading from the spotlight. James Stewart's priorities had long shifted before the death of his wife in 1994, shaped less by ambition and more by age, health, and a gradual retreat from the center of Hollywood life. By the early 1970s, he was already easing out of the constant cycle of film production. The pace that had once defined him gave way to selective appearances, partly by choice and partly because his hearing loss and physical condition made sustained work increasingly difficult. In 1971, he took on television with The Jimmy Stewart Show, playing a college professor surrounded by family, a role that reflected the domestic world he had come to prioritize. The series ended after one season, and afterward, he moved into occasional projects rather than sustained runs. He returned to Hawkins, earning a Golden Globe for his performance as a small-town lawyer, and increasingly appeared on programs like The Tonight Show, where he shared personal poems that revealed a more reflective phase of his public life. By the mid-1970s, his work became intermittent and physically demanding. He returned to the stage in revivals of Harvey and appeared in The Shootist, playing a doctor confronting the end of life opposite John Wayne. He followed this with supporting roles in Airport 77, The Big Sleep, and The Magic of Lassie. Though still recognizable to audiences, his hearing loss increasingly complicated performances and limited the range of roles he could comfortably take on. By 1980, Stewart had effectively entered semi-retirement. His final screen appearances were sporadic and often driven by personal interest, including The Green Horizon, Television projects such as Mr. Kruger's Christmas and Right of Way, a brief appearance in the miniseries North and South, and voice work as Sheriff Wiley Burp in An American Tale, Fievel Goes West. Alongside this gradual slowdown, he received major honors, including the Kennedy Center Honors, an honorary Academy Award, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, marking the close of a long career that had already largely ended in practice. Even as his appearances diminished, he remained loosely connected to public life. He visited the White House during the Reagan years, and renewed interest in Hitchcock films like Rear Window and Vertigo brought his earlier work back into critical conversation. Still, his presence in Hollywood had become increasingly rare, shaped by age, hearing loss, and a growing preference for privacy. After Gloria's death in 1994, that withdrawal became more pronounced. Stewart largely stepped away from public engagement altogether, and his remaining years were marked by declining health and isolation. In 1997, he was hospitalized for an irregular heartbeat. Shortly after, a thrombosis in his leg developed into a pulmonary embolism. He died on July 17, 1997, at the age of 89, surrounded by his children at his Beverly Hills home. He was buried with full military honors at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. More than 3,000 mourners attended his memorial service, marking the end of a career that had stretched from Hollywood's golden age to its modern era. In the end, the man who once embodied endurance on screen did not leave with a final speech or declaration, but a private confession to his children and friends. "I just want to be with Gloria. She was the one and only love of his life." What James Stewart movie was your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.